We are live. And I tell you one thing, guys, I'm particularly happy to be live today because this is my first live since I got my YouTube page back. And I just want to say that there are a lot of things going on in the world today, and my little YouTube page is certainly nowhere near the front of the line of most important issues. But it was a small but symbolic victory. And I really want to thank everybody who contacted the YouTube team, sent letters, maybe not letters. I wouldn't say you got down into the kind of the wounds of letter writing, but you did advocate online. And you know what? It was a lesson learned for me as well, that I think if we stick together and we advocate together, we can get a lot done. We're an unstoppable force. At the end of the day, they're taking down all our pages, and what on earth are we doing wrong except we're speaking out against a genocide? I was just making the point online when I did a little video to thank people that whilst I'm grateful I got the page back up, and whilst it is a symbolic victory, we can't then just accept sort of crumbs from the king's table. These big tech companies, and I'm aware of the irony, I'm using them as we speak. Unfortunately, we have to use the tools of empire, but whilst we use the tools, we can still rail against those institutions, and we can demand accountability from them. At the end of the day, they're the people carrying water for the genocide heirs right now. We are in the right, and we should be battling them accordingly. But I will conclude my little intro on a positive note. Thank you again to the Canary who reached out, to the National in Scotland. Absolutely, we always get like incredible solidarity from them. I wouldn't doubt you. But all the people who messaged me as well. As I say, it's a tiny thing, but it's a symbolic little thing, and this is how we do it. So I'm delighted to be back with you guys. Thank you to the usual posters. Not my brother, how's it going? Alakatusuratum. Good evening, everyone. Oh, alakatusuratum. Okay, I'm going to practice that as the show goes. Zizu in the house. Great to have you all back, guys. It feels like a homecoming. Now, I have a special episode for you today. I haven't had two guests on my stream yet, so I'm drunk with my own power now that I'm back. But today's a very important issue. Regular viewers of my nonsense will know that I like to push back against the idea that Ireland is somehow a pro-Palestine country in terms of its institutions. As you've probably gathered by now, we have some of the best people in terms of advocacy for Palestine in Europe, without a doubt, and grassroots movements. But the actual institutions, and the government in particular, are so craven, so beholden to particularly US interests, that they're afraid to do anything that pisses off Zionists and the US government at all. But for me, there's been a new low on this sort of set of circumstances. The Irish government has always been craven. We still have a thriving trade with Israel. We still have the use of our Shannon airport for the US to carry munitions so that the genocide can continue, albeit at a slightly slower pace in Palestine. Right now, we're effectively a vassal state of the US. And this Irish government, I think, have done more than most to make sure that that relationship stays firm. We do a lot of solidarity with the Palestinians and the Lebanese in terms of little pretty speeches. But as Francesca Albanese put it better than I ever could, in terms of meaningful action, we've done nothing, less than nothing. And that's shameful. And it is shameful. But there's a new law. There's a new aspect of shame, because a long-standing relationship between Irish academia and Palestinian academia, and a relationship that was begun, I think, in 2016, where students from Palestine, if they so choose, can come to Ireland to pursue their studies. There's been a sudden sort of impasse in that. There's been a sudden tendency to revoke the visas of Palestinian students who have everything they need, the qualifications, the funding, and suddenly their visas are being stopped or whatnot. So to talk about this very shameful issue, I'm delighted to have two excellent guests today, and I'm going to bring them in sequence, or maybe I'll just bring them in together. I mean, they're well able to come in together. First of all, Brendan, Ciarán, I am so pleased to have you on the show. And do you know what? I'm so pleased. I'm going to read a little intro for you. Dr. Brendan Ciarán Browne is an associate professor in peace studies and fellow of Trinity College Dublin, specializing in conflict resolution, transitional justice, and Palestine. He previously taught in Al-Quds University in occupied Palestine and has spent more than a decade strengthening links between Irish and Palestinian academia. His research is focused extensively on Palestine, colonialism, political violence, and the limits of conventional approaches to peace building. Now, I would have to say that I have been previously on a panel with this extraordinary guy, and it is a pleasure to have you on the show, sir. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks, man. Thank you. Looking forward to it.
Sounding good and looking good. And I'm going to bring in a regular contributor to this channel and a regular sort of collaborator with me and my nonsense, Abubaker in the house. How are you, buddy?
I'm fine. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm going to give you a little intro as well. I mean, it's only fair. Abubaker Abed, if you don't know him, you probably do know him at this point. But if you don't, he's a Palestinian journalist and writer from Gaza who has reported extensively from inside the Strip, documenting the genocide and destruction of everyday Palestinian life. His journalism is internationally acclaimed. He's recently been reporting on the plight of Gazan students, or students from Gaza, I should say, who've secured places and fully funded scholarships at Irish universities only to encounter rejection by the Irish immigration system. So Abubaker, I might start with yourself just to contextualize who these students are and what perhaps the route of pursuing their studies in Ireland might mean to these students that are suddenly being stopped from doing what they would like to do.
So these students are first like me because I was one of them and I'm still one of them. Students have been trapped in Gaza during the past 3 years. Their homes have been destroyed. Their universities have been reduced to rubble. They have everything in their lives just evaporated during the last 2 years, pulverized during the last 3 years due to the ongoing genocide. And they have been very conscientious, I would say, in applying for universities outside, particularly universities that would accept them. And they had, as they have described it to me, they have had a lot of hope. They still have a lot of hope in in Ireland as a country, because that's what they've always been hearing, that Ireland is a pro-Palestine country. It would accept students and it would not impose barriers on them or on their journeys to come to the country. And these are brilliant students. Some of them are engineers, some of them are doctors, some of them are they're studying medical fields, some of them are prospective journalists, pharmacists, and they have been very excellent students in Gaza. They've added to the Gaza Strip in the years they have studied before the genocide. And they have been endeavoring to get a chance outside because they have nothing to stay for in Gaza, but they still have demonstrated the willingness to go back home. And this is a point that we need to mention because it was pointed out in the rejection letter that you don't need to ask a genocide survivor about his willingness to go back home, because definitely that's where he belongs and he would love to be their whole life. And I've been speaking to them before and after this happened. I was very lucky to have helped some of the students to get out, as I was helped before by others. And then all this mess has happened, and I took them students, and they feel utterly devastated and gutted because of the decisions. They feel it's unfair because, as I said, they've been very conscientious in applying for these universities, and they've done everything. Like, they have secured fully funded scholarships. They have been deservedly accepted onto third-level Irish universities, including Trinity, including other universities like Griffith and others. And then they were denied out of no reason. And when I talked to the students, they said the requirements needed or spelled out in the rejection letters are impossible to meet. And definitely they're impossible to meet. But as I said, the students now, we're talking about over 35 rejections. And the Dutch has reported that the Irish government has now refused Palestinian visas more than it has granted in a decade, which is absolutely something that everybody needs to ask themselves about, particularly in Ireland and Irish people. So it's a very heartbreaking time for the students who are still asking me every single day, is there any hope? What are people doing in Ireland? That we have nothing left. Universities are precarious. They've been destroyed. The educational system is very fragile because of what Israel has done to it. So their hopes are being dashed deliberately, I would say. And it's an attempt that I don't have any explanation to, but these are the students whom we are talking about.
And Brendan, talk to me about the sort of, because in your article in Middle East Monitor, you talk about the kind of ludicrous demands that Abubaker touches on the students to provide extra documentation. It almost read like an absurd, it's like a dark, absurdist piece of comedy almost, what's being demanded on them. Can you talk a little bit about that, please?
Yeah, and I mean, just to echo what Abubaker was saying, it's a real stain on the sort of years that we've built up these relationships, to see them kind of be sort of undermined in this way. And I mean, we get so much in our classrooms and in our university spaces when we bring our brothers and sisters from Palestine over. We learn so much. We grow as educationalists ourselves, and I think it's really important just to highlight just how much we get from the experience. This is not just a one-way street. Sometimes we forget that, but we really bring we get so much energy from learning about these different contexts and these different situations. I mean, some of the requirements that were being asked of the students was to provide bank statements, dating back from, I don't know, I assume over a year, as evidence of funds in the account. I mean, this is absolutely insane. Anybody that's been following what's been going on for the past 3 years, and of course for many, many years before that, will know that the policy and the aim of the Zionist regime has been to erase, has been to destroy everything. I mean, they have come up with as many ways as possible of destroying the civilian infrastructure, of which banking is a major component of that, and alongside that, being asked to register an appeal via post. I mean, that is absolutely absurd as well. Asking students who are excelling against all of the conditions they find themselves in. Think about having to go and try and find electricity just to charge your laptop, let alone having to find an actual functioning working post office to lodge an appeal. So the absurdity of all of that is obviously something that we should be drawing close attention to when we look at this. But there is obviously something deeper happening here. This is just an excuse. These are just some of the points that are put forward as obstacles, when in actual fact, what I think, and again, this is my opinion and it is speculative without evidence, is that this is in some way being mainstreamed as a policy at a government level. There is a deliberate attempt here to pull back on this relationship, or to prevent students from Gaza and across the West Bank as well from traveling to Ireland. And I think serious questions need to be asked as to why that is taking place. And especially when you think about the fact that these offers that come in from universities take a lot of time, of processing time and energy as well. Academics review applications, institutions review applications, look at capacity. This is not just a charitable thing. This is based on merit, based on attainment, as Abubaker had mentioned as well. So I would love to see our universities say, well, hold on a wee second. If all of our energy is being pushed into this process, and then at the final stage, these additional hurdles are being put forward, then somebody has to answer for that. There should be some kind of accountability. And unfortunately, there are many layers that are piled on top of this process, as I've mentioned, that has made this whole situation completely absurd. And it, as you mentioned at the very beginning, it puts complete pay to the notion that Ireland is the most pro-Palestine country in Europe and all of this. I mean, of course, and just to end the point on that is, we always have to separate the government from the people. We always have to separate the government from the people, because the people on the island, by and large, are steadfast behind the Palestinian people when it comes to their pursuit of inevitable liberation and self-determination and whatever that looks like. But the government are very out of step with this. And so, we need to see some kind of intervention here, I think, from the academic side.
You had a tweet as well, Brendan, that I thought summed up the whole thing, which I thought was very, like what could be sort of more shameful than this in many ways, but it's for anybody who thinks Ireland is an uncomplicated ally of the Palestinian cause. So you've got these students who have the funding, who have the academic capabilities, who have been accepted from universities, and they're having their visas denied. And I think you were saying in your tweet, wasn't it, that you could be an Israeli who may have served in the IDF,
But
come
you
to
know
Ireland
what,
but won't need.
sorry to cut you off, but
Yeah,
you know
go
what,
ahead. Go ahead.
you know what I'm most irritated by is that first, these students are not funded by the government, so they're not a burden.
Yes, they're independently funded.
They're privately funded by external donors from other countries. Okay, this is first. And second, these students are not like, the Irish government accepts over 40,000 students every year, international students. 70% of them, according to the stats in Ireland, which I've read recently, come from India. And most of them, they don't get scholarships. No, they pay for it. They pay all these tuition fees and things like that. And thirdly, what is the most irritating part about it is quite impossible to get an approval from the COGAT, which is the Israeli military's unit at the border, to get an approval to get outside Gaza. So the fact that these students have got a permit to get out of Gaza from the Israeli military is in itself a miracle. So why are you adding more burden to the students if you claim to be a pro-Palestine? And that's crazy. Like, people, like, all the time, if you ask students in Gaza, if you have asked me, my main worry before getting outside of Gaza, because probably I might be a little bit different story, but for the students, if you ask them, the main worry, the main obstacle, the only obstacle they are worrying about is to get approval, is to get a permit from the Israeli military's COGAT. It's very hard, it's very impossible.
Yeah.
People were detained at the border. Some of them who were accepted to go to Italy. So you're adding these barriers to their journey to make them stumble. I don't know what to say, but it's completely shameful and inhumane.
And what is going on in the background to either of you? Obviously, we're not, we don't have definitive proof here, but as I suppose I have been, and you guys certainly have also maybe fallen victim to, well, I know you have, Abubaker, I'm not sure if you have, Brendan, but there's a very strong lobby in Britain, for instance. There's a very strong Zionist lobby in Britain. And often I find myself when I'm away getting tagged by people on Twitter, and tagging in like the Met Police and trying to get me, deported from the UK and all this kind of stuff. And people do tell me that the lobby is so strong in Britain that it can filter into Ireland. That's just a theory that I had. I've talked about this before, that because we don't really have a very strong Zionist lobby sort of within Ireland, but we are beholden to the British and US lobby. Is the lobby in Britain and the US involved in this? Do you guys think?
Well, maybe I'll just say a couple of things about that. Yeah. And again, as you said, like we don't have all of the information. That's half the problem here. Exactly. We're dealing with half information, which makes it even more challenging then to provide resolutions. So I don't necessarily think that's where all of the pressure's coming from here. Now I would say as well, as I'm sure you would agree, the lobby exists in Ireland. Let's make no mistake about it. In some shape or form, we've all fallen victim. And we'll not name any names of groups or individuals, but we've all been targeted and smeared by certain people. And we should also remember that the current government has in its programme for government a commitment to implementing the IHRA definition on anti-Semitism that was just added into their programme of government without any real sort of consultation. So it's clear that level of how do you say, sort of consciousness is there anyway. I personally think that there's something else going on here, and I think that this is an issue with Ireland trying to grapple with this idea of the rise of the far right, this idea of xenophobia and racism, this idea of trying to almost placate that type of fascism, essentially, that is on the rise. And I think that this government is doing that. It is listening to that language. It is saying, right, well, we need to be careful here. We need to manage this in a way. And I think genuinely that this is having an impact upon some of the applications that are coming in from Gaza. That, again, I don't have evidence to back that up. That is just speculation. But again, it's speculation that a lot of people in the solidarity movement who are doing incredible work, incidentally, behind the scenes that people won't know about. Certainly there's a lot of legal work going on quietly behind the scenes here, that people don't know about. I was in contact with a lawyer this morning about something else, and he was giving me a lot of information that about what's happening. So I do think there is that sort of placating to the far right and trying to be seen to I don't know, almost give those guys credence. So that's where I think the pressure is coming from. You can't ever write off the pressure of the Zionist lobby in the UK, right, or America or whatever. And we know, and we have experience of that in the past, you know, with other campaigns that we've both been involved in. So, but I just think it's multi-layered. It's not as straightforward as it's this or it's that. There's a lot going on, I think, here, you know, which is why I think that, and I return to this point, I think the universities, I think the leadership across all of the Irish universities should be coming together and should be saying, this is a stain. We have made these offers. These people have achieved very, very high results, the highest of results to get here. We have made the offers. We should be making representations to government to say, we expect them to be able to travel and get and take up their offers. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. I would love somebody to say that's happening already. Maybe there are private conversations happening behind the scenes. Perhaps there are. And some of those university leaders, I think, are entitled to the benefit of the doubt, for they have moved on a journey in the last couple of years, not as far as all of us would perhaps have wanted, but have moved. So maybe that's happening, but that's my reading of the situation. I don't know if Abubaker has a different understanding.
No, I think there's no. You're right. Like, the lobby does exist. Definitely, we saw that clearly, crystal clear, and in the renaming of House Park, and the motion that was cancelled immediately after a couple of tweets from American and Israeli officials, and then Simon Harris and Michael Martin, they came up with shameful tweets saying that they are horrified by this motion and that Herzog represents the history of Ireland. What kind of history does Herzog represent? Genocide of over what? Killing of dozens and hundreds of people in the occupied West Bank and these now occupied villages, or the expulsion of 200,000 people. What kind of history does he represent? So this has been very crystal clear. Like, we don't have to accentuate it because it was always conspicuous. But the thing, like, there has been, because we're back to the speculation, there has been some speculation because nothing has been clarified by the government. I've reached out also to the Office of the Justice Minister, and the reply that I've got is something that, like, he says that the office says on his behalf that he's acutely aware of the humanitarian crisis. Okay, so if you are acutely aware, how are you asking the students to pay the decision by post when you know that there is not a single post office in Gaza anymore? Even, you know what, even before the genocide, there is only one main post office in Gaza. One. And it needs over 2 weeks to send something from Gaza because it needs approval from the Israeli military, and then to go outside and to go to Jordan or Egypt, and then to the country where this post must go. So how are you asking these students to submit all this? Now, there is some concern by the government, because you mentioned the far right, which I believe to be right. That there are some concerns that the students will seek asylum. Okay, how many students are there? 35 to 60, let's say. 60 students. How many are being accepted into the asylum seeking process every single year in Ireland? I don't have a stat, but I believe it's hundreds. I believe so. There are Pakistanis, there are others. Okay, so who is the most deserving group to seek asylum? Those who have been out of a genocide. This is the most deserving group. What are you afraid of? What are you worried about? They're not going to be a burden to the government in the slightest, and they are privately funded.
But isn't it a little bit also disingenuous? Do you not think as well? Because it takes away the notion that every Palestinian comrade that I've met that comes to Ireland has a very strong desire to return to Palestine and be involved in the rebuilding. They want to stay here. Yeah. Exactly. So this utopian space that we have in Ireland, it's so arrogant. It's arrogant beyond belief. I mean, has anybody seen what the situation is on the ground for people who are, in Ireland trying to make things, just to get by at the moment in time. So
and islanders have funds, Brendan.
Yeah,
Ireland,
of course.
every European country has funds
for
to
sure.
host asylum
Yes.
seekers. The most deserving group is Palestinians.
Totally, I totally agree. This was one of the things that you and I talked about a little bit before, just privately, because there's this idea that there was a sort of temporary waiver for people coming during the outbreak of the Ukrainian situation, and then with the situation here, and some people were drawing parallels, and that was one of the very specific questions that I asked my legal friend before we came on air, just to sort of, because he was very clear to me that there are differences here. There are differences. Claiming asylum is covered under a different branch of the law versus the issuing of visas, which is a completely different situation as well. So it's also wrapped up in this, what I would consider to be the violence of bureaucracy. There's a lot of violent bureaucracy going on here as well, and that's no sort of recourse for joy or anything for people who are trying to get a visa. That's also awful. But a lot of this is also to do with that sort of people falling through the cracks, I think, a little bit as well. That should be that we should. And again, it goes back to that point about the multiple layers of bullshit really that's taking place here. I couldn't find a more eloquent word, but I think sometimes that sums it all up.
In keeping with this channel and this kind of level of output.
Yeah, and I do. I mean, I think if you just strip it back a little bit to its most basic principles here, the Irish government could show a little bit of humanity in the face of.
It's a humanitarian mission.
Absolutely.
It is a humanitarian mission.
Exactly.
If you have an atom of humanity inside the entire government buildings, you would accept these as students. You're giving Israelis free visa travel here. You have at Salesforce ex-Israeli soldiers who have been into Gaza committing war crimes, and you don't give a toss about it. And you're bringing Israelis without anybody caring about all what is happening behind the scenes. And you have made a shameful decision about the occupied territories bill. You've just enacted 30% of it. You've scrapped the services, which constitutes up to 70% of the bill. And it's from a low to another low, a low to another low, a low to another low. So, I mean, the students, they feel, that's what they told me, they feel that they have been sentenced to death. The attacks continue. They have no homes. They have nothing. You know what? The ultimate dream, and this is what I've heard from the students, that they want to first try, and look how heartbreaking, heart-shattering it is, that they want to go to a toilet, a proper toilet, not even study, not even eat, not even do anything. These people have been living in tents, dilapidated tents, for 3 years. These students want to try a proper toilet, and you're denying them visas. How inhumane somebody can be. How callous can you be to deny them visas? And for me, sorry, I just have to be very crystal clear about that. And for me as a student, when I see other students in Gaza rejected by the Irish government, while I feel a lot of contrition. I feel a lot of guilt about it. Why these students were rejected and I was accepted? It's not fair. That's why I'm fighting for it. And I'm ready to do anything for these students to be accepted and come to Ireland. This is their right. This is the least that they can do. I'm really, really, really heartbroken about it.
And before we come to what we can do, because if we're waiting for the Irish government to do the right thing because it's the morally right thing to do, we'll obviously be waiting. So we'll get to both of you on what we can do as a community, not just in Ireland, but for people watching outside of Ireland, what they can do as well, because I'm sure similar things are happening in their countries. But it's worth noting for people who don't know that the Irish, effectively our Prime Minister, Micheál Martin, always says that Ireland has done so much. We lead the way. He often gets thanks, as he says, from the Palestinian Authority.
From the traitors.
He gets, as you've said, Abubaker, he's a traitor who gets thanks from traitors. But I just think this would be such a great example for him to actually put his money where his mouth is and do something tangible for the first time ever, arguably, this would be such an easy thing for him to do, because as you guys have outlined so beautifully, and as you said, Brendan, you've literally been working on this relationship that goes back for a decade. The relationship is already there. You just need to keep doing the thing you were doing. He doesn't even have to do anything extra, you know. So to come on to, I suppose, where we can get active as a community on this, like what are the next steps to advocate for these students right now to make sure that they
can I answer first, because it's important.
Of course.
Sorry, Brendan. Because it's important you mentioned this, and how can what we can do for this. If you look at the British regime, they have been forced by the people and the activists and the celebrities to accept students into Gaza, and they have initiated a fundraiser for the students, the celebrities, and they are auctioning their items to fund these students. I would love to see that in Ireland. There are celebrities in Ireland. There are people who have a lot of wealth. I would love them to do this, because they are the ones who contribute most to the country and to the to the country's every section. So I would love to see that from people, from the most wealthy people in Ireland, to accept, to fundraise for Gaza students and allow them into the country. If the UK regime, when you want to compare how your morality, you look at the British regime, which has a history of genocide, long history of genocides, and they are now accepting Gaza students, and you're calling yourself a legitimate democratic government, and you are denying these students, these very vulnerable, the most vulnerable students, visas. So how are you democracy even? How are you? So when people tell you that you're a regime, you have to accept it, because this is who you are. This is what you're doing. And it makes me so angry and so sad that this is what has happened. So I think the Irish academia have to do more. There has been a story in RTE, and there has been a lot at the Irish Times. And I'm glad that the Irish media, which has been complicit, unfortunately, has covered it at least. And we're seeing more pressure, online pressure, a petition that has been signed by nearly 7,000 people. But the fact that it shows that during the Irish Parliament recess, I find it bizarre. I find it really, really purposeful. I would believe so. No one is in the door to talk about it. No one is in the door to pressure Michael Martin, who said visas for Ukrainian citizens to be waived after the Ukraine-Russia conflict, which pales in comparison to what has happened in Gaza over the past 3 years. So why they chose it in this time? What are they doing? Unbelievable.
Yeah. Brendan?
So I can maybe give an overview of just what I understand is happening, maybe behind the scenes a little bit.
Yeah.
First of all, not nearly enough. I think we can all agree on that. There are some legal groups at the moment doing some incredible legal work. There's an organization called Irish Lawyers for Palestine who have sort of been galvanized around the issue, or certainly, and they have a history of being, at the forefront of these conversations as well. So they are appraised of what's going on. The person who I spoke to, as I said before this call, and last week as well, about the same issue, made reference to the fact that the leftist political parties need to get together a bit more and have one shared political voice on this. I think there's a bit of fragmentation happening. There's not enough of a shared platform on. I don't care if they can't agree on the color of whatever, but on this issue specifically, it would be nice to see almost a shared declaration, a shared strategy that that the left could organize around. And whatever you want to conceive of what the left is in Ireland, I think they have a good sort of role to play in this as well. And the problem, and then of course, I would like to see a much greater cohesive academic voice on this as well. People should be writing to their institutions and saying, well, why are those students who are meant to be coming to my class at the University of Limerick or in Galway or Maynooth or Dublin, why are they not actually going to get here? What are we doing to make sure as an institution we can support that? And I don't think enough of that has taken place. I mean, don't open up the can of worms here on the liberal silent academics. I mean, we could go back to 2023 and see what was taking place, and maybe we don't want to do that. We just want to move forward a bit. So I'd like to see academics get more energized around this, because I know there are people here that whenever whenever the students arrive here, people really do click in. There is good community here. There are
Yeah,
good people doing really
seen
good
that as well.
stuff that takes place behind the scenes that people don't see. These are real brilliant people, and they work in the academy as well. So if we could only try and galvanize that energy a little bit, I think that's what we need to do. And of course, it needs to be put before this government and said, look, this is a complete shame. This is, as you said, Tak, this is an easy win, if you want to call it that. This is an opportunity to really put your money where your mouth is. I mean, Ireland likes to call itself, you know, a nation state that punches above its weight when it comes to diplomacy, punches above its weight when it comes to humanitarian aid and intervention, the UN and everything else. So this feels like something that could be pretty easy in that regard. So there are multiple layers here. There are the legal route that is happening, I can tell you now, behind the scenes. And the academics need to be more determined on this. The universities need to be more aligned on this, pushed together. And then the political left need to get their act together and put statements out and hold this government to account, because that's what the left is meant to do. That's where the strategy is, I think.
That's great. There's a guy here, Sean O'Sullivan, makes a great point. Palestinian kids were also stopped coming here to play hurling. And maybe that was the beginning of this kind of campaign to stop Palestinians coming here. Like, and that was such a shameful episode where I had some dealings with the people who were leading that campaign, and they just worked day and night to try and get a few kids to come to Ireland to play our national sport and maybe come out of Croke Park for a game of hurling. And they were stopped, and it was a really determined campaign to get them stopped. So again, I just say to people, because we get a lot of people watching this channel who aren't from Ireland, but it's an international story. And one thing I know about Ireland for sure is that the Irish government tends to, I don't know, do you agree, guys? The Irish government tends to do the right thing morally if there's enough shame on them. If the story becomes international and other people talk about it and highlight how shameful Ireland is and how ludicrous it is to sort of, you know, postulate that Ireland is this pro-Palestine country in Europe, but when it comes to taking any real action, they always, you know, shit the bed. So if you're not from Ireland, this is also a story that I would please urge people to share and talk about, see how it relates to what's going on in your own universities. Abubaker, I might leave the last word to you, because you have been getting lots of comments here, which I think is lovely. I forgot to ask you how you are after your ongoing health issues. And I know you were in hospital recently, but there's been several comments coming through saying that you look well, wishing you well. And as you know, you've got like endless love in Ireland. I might just leave the last comment to you, buddy, if you'd like to take the floor.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I think the best cure for me right now would be to see these students coming to Ireland and starting taking on the courses in this September. That would be the best cure for me. And I hope that all people listening to me will talk about this and will try to pile up the pressure on the Irish government and the Irish Justice Ministry to accept the students and to withdraw the decision. Yes, I picked up, and this is all relevant because I picked up the same issues that once happened to me in Gaza, hepatitis A virus symptoms and the malnutrition thing that happened to me in Gaza during the genocide, and also before the genocide because of the crippling siege imposed by the Israelis. And I was suddenly, all of a sudden, I started feeling fatigued, started feeling very fragile, and then I went to the hospital, and I was home quarantined for quite 3 weeks, and now I'm still in my last stage of recovery. But no matter what happens, we have to keep fighting for the people who deserve humanity, dignity, and human rights. And I really, really hope from the depth of my heart that all these students will be accepted and will be traveling to Ireland very, very soon. That's all I hope for.
Thank you so much, buddy. Guys, it's a pleasure speaking to both of you. I'm going to have Brendan's Middle East Monitor article, which gives you more in-depth information about this. It's beautifully written. I'm going to have that in the show notes. Anything you can do to advocate for this very worthy cause, please do it. And I'll speak to you again soon, gentlemen. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Bye.
Appreciate it. Peace. Peace. So, guys, thank you so much for your lovely comments today. It's great to be back, and we go back at it, I suppose, trying to hold people to account. And I'm very happy to spend this episode and maybe even future episodes, if it needs to be, on holding the Irish government to account. I know comrades in Spain have said the same, that they sometimes, you know, Spain and Ireland particularly, I think, are seen as these kind of utopias of pro-Palestinianism. But when you just get into the weeds of it, like in terms of real action, we're just so shameful. And this particular government, they drive me crazy for all sorts of reasons. But at the start of the genocide, I had this thing in my head of, I didn't want to burst people's bubbles if I was abroad, if I was in perhaps a Middle Eastern country, if I was on the flotilla, and people would say, oh my God, the Irish government are great, aren't they? They're like the Malaysian government. They're like the Colombian government at the time, obviously not the new craven puppet Colombian government, and the Irish are like that, aren't they? And I'd almost be like, just let's talk about something else, because I felt so ashamed. I felt so ashamed of how paltry the Irish government have been, and this massive chasm between the people and the will of the people in terms of their support for Palestine. Like, I'll be brutally honest with you. It's not like, you know, we're not getting thousands and thousands on the street in support of Palestine right now. We were at one point in the genocide, but your ordinary person in Ireland would stand with the Palestinian cause. They mightn't be vehement about it. They mightn't be taking the streets. They mightn't all be involved in direct actions, and many of them are. But in our bones, in our DNA, the Irish population stands with Palestine and Lebanon. We get it. We just simply fucking get it. Simple as that. We're probably the only country in Europe that does get it. So if you put that type of population up against a government that is just doing everything it can to maintain its relationship with the US primarily, but because the US and Israel is kind of the same thing now, we see that the outbreak of the illegal war in Iran, they're one and the same, they think the same, they do the same things, and they're both becoming, well, Israel's already there, but they're both becoming pariah states. But this Irish government is so craven, but it's also so fucking stupid that it's hitching itself to this thing that's going down the Swanee. They don't think forward in any way. They don't see the way the US relationship is in tatters. They don't see the way that they're aligned to pariah states to maintain their own business interests. I understand we have to protect Irish jobs, yada, yada, yada. But at what point would we put sort of meaningful solidarity and your own soul, your own spirit ahead of job creation or keeping jobs? At what point? Like what I've been saying for months on this page and other pages is what price your soul. And the Irish government, I think, arguably this moment with these students from Gaza is a perfect example. It sort of epitomizes it all, that this is maybe the last chance for the Irish government to show that it has any fucking soul. You know, I mean, I don't believe that it actually does, but I do believe there are people in government that must have some semblance of humanity, that go home, that kiss their kids goodnight, that probably want their own kids to have opportunities and go to university and whatnot. And I do believe there's members of the Irish government that aren't completely spineless, racist cowards. So step up now. Like, it's kind of now or never. We're 3 years into a genocide, as Abubaker beautifully and horrifically described, the reality of students just wanting to use an actual functioning toilet. That's where the bar is for students in Gaza right now. And so the Irish government, I'm not saying that this is definitely true. We're not sure if this is true. But if they're pandering to the far right, if they're listening to the Israel lobby, whatever the reasoning is, there's a 10-year relationship between the different academic sort of institutions in Palestine and Ireland. It's a long-standing relationship. And suddenly at this moment, where the students in Gaza need that relationship more than ever, 3 years into a genocide, there's suddenly been a massive stop in that happening. And why is that happening? So that's it, guys. All right, Nicole in the house. I'm going to be coming over to London soon, guys. I'm not sure what date yet. So you might be seeing a more sort of professional live stream, maybe involving myself and Nicole pretty soon, rather than me here in what is actually a converted toilet in Cork. And anytime I raise my hands, the image could go out of sync and my green screen's revealed to you, you know? So we've got a new show coming out. It's really good. I'm going over to London to do a little bit for that. It's going to be coming out soon on this channel. I'm going to conclude by saying one more big thank you to everyone who advocated. You know what? It's not about me. We know it's not about me. I mean, much as I'd like to make it about me, it's kind of not, though. And I'm serious there. The way the pro-Palestine community rallied around my stupid YouTube page over the last couple of days, it reminded me of what happens when a depraved Zionist is in trouble for probably saying something genocidal in some media appearance, and the Zionists just rally around him, circle the wagons, or her, and they protect each other. It's the only thing that you could say objectively, that's something that they do, that you got to hand it to them. We need to do that more. If we protected each other, and if we stayed, you know, solidified, as Brendan was saying earlier about the left in Ireland, if we just had the one message, even just on this occasion, we could get a lot done. And I think that's also the case with the pro-Palestine community. We're more numerous. We have all the energy. We're in the right. You know, we are on the right side of history. As long as we don't allow ourselves to fracture and we support each other, we are literally unstoppable. And I'm so grateful for the fact that YouTube had to cower inside about a half an hour. Such was the outpouring of support for my stupid little YouTube page. If that doesn't tell you something, I don't know what will. Because obviously YouTube and these big tech overlords, again, like the Irish government, they're not waking up one morning and deciding to do the right thing because it's morally the right thing to do. It just depends on how much people pressure is on them. So a massive thank you for everyone watching today and always. I will be back tomorrow with another wonderful guest and another topic, obviously, maybe not obvious, but connected to Palestine again. Something on the Palestinian resistance we'll be dealing with tomorrow. Thank you so much for watching. Keep doing what you're doing because you're doing it exceptionally well. Peace, love, and justice. And justice has to be first. It just